Tonight, midterm fallout.
We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years.
With no red wave coming, what does it all mean for 2024?
Our intention is to run again.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th.
An announcement that could be put on hold.
I think he needs to put it on pause, absolutely.
And the Sunshine State preparing for another whack from Mother Nature.
We've seen beach erosion, especially in areas that had already seen erosion from Hurricane Ian.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
With races yet to be called in the 2022 midterms, some are already looking ahead to the 2024 presidential election. From our Washington studio, I'm John Jessup.
And good evening, I'm Jenna Browder. Well, as we wait to see how the balance of power will shake out on Capitol Hill, focus is already shifting to 2024. Right. And that, of course, includes the future plans of former President Donald Trump.
While he has strongly hinted at announcing another run for the White House next week, lackluster midterm results may alter those plans. CBN's Matt Galka joins us now with more on the Trump effect. Matt.
Well, it certainly did appear that Donald Trump was expecting to ride a red wave of momentum toward another White House bid announcement. Since no wave emerged, that timing could be in doubt. At the very least, people in his own party are recommending he hold off until possibly December.
Actually, they were hoping for big losses, but that's not happening. So the numbers have been amazing so far.
Trump expressed confidence election night, but has since called the results disappointing. A predicted red wave for Republicans waned, leaving control of Capitol Hill still up in the air. While he saw some wins, high-profile Senate candidates Trump endorsed floundered. Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania lost outright. Herschel Walker in Georgia is heading for a runoff, and Blake Masters in Arizona trails in a race still too close to call. Those results possibly amplified by Trump's pre-election promise.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
Speculation about making another White House run public at this point is now being openly questioned by Trump confidants. Former Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany recommends holding off until the Georgia Senate runoff is decided.
I think he needs to put it on pause, absolutely. Look, he'll make that decision, he'll make his own decision, but
does he go to Georgia?
If I'm advising any contender, DeSantis, Trump, whomever, no one announces 2024 until we get through December 6th.
In an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer, retiring Republican Senator Pat Toomey cast some blame on the former president, saying, quote, "I think Donald Trump's influence gradually but steadily declines, and I think it accelerates after the debacle that he's responsible for to some degree." The other elephant in the room is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who didn't need Trump to cruise to a decisive victory.
Thanks to the overwhelming support of the people of Florida, we not only won election, we have rewritten the political map.
That puts him in an even stronger position as a potential frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024. Trump already nicknaming DeSantis at a rally before the midterms.
Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%.
The potential showdown and infighting already delighting Democrats.
Who do you think would be the tougher competitor?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other.
For what it's worth, Trump took to his social platform, Truth Social, to say that he was not angry about the midterm results and that he was, quote, very busy looking into the future, already looking ahead to 2024. Guys?
All right, Matt Galka, thank you so much. And here now for analysis, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, we just heard from Senator Toomey, others also blaming former President Trump. Karl Rove writing this in the Wall Street Journal, quote, some of Trump's candidates who he backed were also knuckleheads with strange beliefs and closets full of problems. Many of these remarkably weak candidates came courtesy of Donald Trump, who didn't vet his endorsements. David, how much responsibility does Donald Trump bear for Tuesday night?
Well, before I answer that burning question, let's not bury the lead. Welcome back, Jenna. It is great to have you back here at CBN, of course, the Faith Nation desk, for sure.
Thank you.
Look, here's my answer to Karl Rove. I mean, it's blah, blah, blah. And let me maybe articulate a little bit further on that. Look, here's the truth, and we know this. The Democrats have been after Trump for the longest time. The media has been after Trump. The establishment Republicans have been after Trump. And guess what? There's the trifecta. They're all coming against Trump. So they're spinning this as this was a bad night for Trump. There is data out there. It's very easy to find that Trump actually did a lot better than people are saying. Look, the media is spinning this way. Let me give you some data points, if I could, real quick. Donald Trump could we're talking about key races, and this is from Axios. This is from Axios, not from a conservative website. Axios is saying Donald Trump could win 10 out of the 11 key Senate races that have gone on this cycle. He could win 12 of the 17, the one in terms of the endorsements that he's made, 12 of the 17 House races that are key in these midterms when all is said and done. Many of this is outstanding. It's a pretty good track record. Not to mention Kerry Lake, who questioned the 2020 election, could win the governorship in Arizona. J.D. Vance, who won in Ohio, had questioned the 2020 election. Ron Johnson, who won in Wisconsin and endorsed by Trump, questioned the 2020 election. Look, I can go on. The point is that you're not hearing that part from the media. So I think we need to take this all with a grain of salt and ask this very simple question. What's the motive? Well, the motive is very simple. They never want to see Donald Trump ever, not only close to the White House. They don't want to see him in Washington. They want him to go play golf at Mar-a-Lago where it's 74 and sunny every day. That's what they want.
David, you heard that clip from Matt's package where Joe Biden was responding to who he would rather go against, and Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, and he said he'd like to see them go at it each other. But what about President Biden? With Democrats doing better than expected in this past midterm election, does that give President Biden more leverage to run for re-election?
I really don't think so. I think, guys, if we can take a step back, because we talk about in CBN News the truth matters, and because the truth matters, let's look at a forest from the tree situation here. It may not have been as big of a night for Republicans, for sure. That's full stop. That's truth. But here's the other part of the truth, which is, how about in a week's time, a week and a half? Let's see how the midterms shake out. And so in answer to the question about Biden, I think they're, in a way, kind of measuring the drapes a little bit too early here with Biden and this idea that the Democrats did well. No, it's like a football game. It's like if you're like a team that's not very good and you're taking on the great team and you think you're going to get blown out 35-0 and the final score instead is 35-21, you're like, hey, we hung in there. We did well. Oh, this just in. You still lost. And that's probably what's going to end up happening to Democrats. I think that's important. I think we need to put that perspective out there.
David, with a great football analogy. CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. Thanks as always.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, guys.
Well, as we know, Americans are very concerned about the economy.
That is right. We have some updates tonight on a couple of indicators that help gauge how things are going. First, new inflation numbers from the Labor Department. For the month of October, inflation was at 7.7%. Just in terms of trying to simplify things, that means prices are 7.7% higher than they were 1 year ago. They are up 0.4% from September. That's a slowdown in the rate of increase, so it's easing up just a little bit.
In terms of the jobs market, the number of Americans applying for unemployment rose slightly last week to 225,000. That's an increase of 7,000 claims.
Well, right now what we want to do is bring in Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate. Mark, some slight relief from inflation, but talk to us about what costs are still high and what we may see begin to come down.
Yeah, good to see you, Jenna, and John as well. And I think it really is important, not inconsistent with the conversation we're just having about politics, to really keep our eye on the longer term trends. And as you said, the longer term trend in inflation is quite damaging, with a nearly 8% year over year increase. But to your point, where we're seeing some of the most significant increases within that headline number are some of the areas that matter the most to all of us, because they really do represent necessities. So let's go down the list. Food broadly up more than 7% over the past year. Energy broadly up more than 17%. And the measure of what we pay to stay in our homes, whether it's rent or something equivalent to our mortgage payments, that's up about 7%. And what's even most worrying here is that the outlook for heating costs this winter really concerning. So, for example, the cost of natural gas over the past year up 20%. If you have fuel oil to heat your home, that cost is up nearly 70%. So we're not spiking the football with respect to this inflation battle.
Mark, on the jobs front, new jobless claims are up. Just a few seconds left here, but do you expect these numbers to continue this trend?
I expect we'll see a worsening of the job market, Jenna. We should see a rising unemployment rate, fewer numbers of people being hired. We've had a lot of job cut announcements. They have yet to really filter into the system yet.
All right, Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, to some other news we are tracking, a rare November hurricane made landfall in Florida overnight as a Category 1 storm.
Yeah, with the system now moving out, the biggest concerns are over storm surge and flooding. Much of Florida is still recovering from a direct hit by Hurricane Ian just 6 weeks ago. Caitlin Burke has the latest on Tropical Storm Nicole.
Nicole crashed ashore in Florida this morning with heavy rain and wind gusts topping 75 miles an hour. Authorities warning they expect the large storm system to affect the state throughout the day.
The wind from the storm is still very large, and the impact stretches far beyond the center track, with much of the state already experiencing tropical storm force winds.
For many Floridians still rebuilding from Hurricane Ian, this tropical system is too much too soon.
Just exhausting. It's too close together.
A big concern with Nicole following so closely to Ian is beach erosion. Along the Daytona Beach coastline, it's so extensive that police evacuated more than half a dozen high-rise condos.
I think this house is going to go in. I think 4 houses down is going to go in, and I think the pool's going to go in. Yeah.
Heavy winds associated with the storm are also expected to generate a dangerous storm surge throughout the day. At Cape Canaveral, NASA left the $4 billion Artemis 1 rocket on the launch pad as Nicole was bearing down. Gusts of 100 miles per hour battered Artemis, although it's only rated to withstand wind up to 85 miles per hour. Given that strong winds can also easily take down power lines, thousands of power crews are standing by to move into Florida when Nicole moves out. Operation Blessing is also ready, still in the state helping residents recover from Ian.
We still have active volunteer work taking place, working on homes with either tarping, debris removal, and some of the jobs we're also removing, the wet drywall, mucking and gutting.
Teams now also on standby to respond to any needs following this storm.
We just did an emergency meal kit volunteer event on Monday, so we have over 20 pallets of food that we can hand out as well. These are kits that have non-perishable food. There's enough food in this box for a family of 4 to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 days.
Nicole is expected to continue moving through Florida today before heading to Georgia and the Carolinas with heavy winds and rain in the days ahead. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. Well, if you'd like more information about Operation Blessing and how to donate to the Disaster Relief Fund, you can text OBDR to 71777.
After years of COVID, now doctors are warning of a triple-demic this year. The viruses to watch out for and what you can do to protect yourself. Next.
Welcome back. An uptick in people being sick has doctors worried about what's being called a triple-demic this winter.
3 potentially serious viruses are already putting adults and children in hospitals across the country. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains.
Examples of those flooding into hospitals include 8-month-old twins Cameron and Carson Combs. They both have the respiratory virus known as RSV.
His fingertips and his lips were turning blue, and at that point I told her, call 911. It's very hard. I mean, they're so young. I wish it was me laying in the bed instead of them.
Children's hospitals in 9 states are above 80% capacity, with another 5 above 90%.
If we have a child who's very ill and needs to be in a tertiary care hospital, we're having difficulty finding some place to send them. And we've had to send children as far as Louisiana and Arkansas.
To make matters worse, hospitalizations due to the flu are at the highest level in more than a decade.
The influenza season in 2022 has started about 2 months earlier. The first signs of influenza started about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we are seeing every week an increased activity.
The dominant strain is H3N2, which in the past has led to more severe cases.
We have appropriate vaccines that people can take to prevent the infection. We have therapeutics, we have medications with which we can treat the disease. We have excellent tests to identify it. Therefore, we think we are prepared to face even a pretty intense season of influenza.
Doctors say this year's spike in flu and RSV cases is largely because very few people acquired these viruses over the last 2 years because of pandemic restrictions, and therefore have little to no immunity. Right now, COVID cases are actually down, and many Americans have developed an immunity to the virus. New strains, however, can sometimes evade those protections. This triple viral combination triggering some schools to temporarily close, like this one in Indiana that's seen up to 40% of some classes out sick.
I've been the school leader here for 25 years, have never seen anything like this.
Regardless of whether it's RSV, flu, or COVID, healthcare workers expect a very challenging winter.
The hospitals and the physicians are doing the best that they can, and we'll adapt to whatever God sends our way. It's only by His grace that we'll get through this.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
And doctors say the best protection you have from the flu and COVID is to stay up to date on vaccines. There is no vaccine for RSV. Also, doctors stress getting plenty of sleep and boosting your immune system.
All great tips. Well, a setback for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine draws attention to atrocities carried out in a key port city, including where one pastor was held captive by Russian forces. The story of his miraculous release next. Looking overseas, there's a potential turning point in Ukraine. Russia has retreated from the city of Kherson, an important port and provincial capital Russian forces seized early on in the invasion.
The announcement is being met with cautious optimism after Ukrainians suffered all kinds of atrocities under Russian rule. Chuck Holton brings us a story of one pastor who was interrogated and eventually set free from Kherson.
Kherson residents board buses under forced evacuation orders from the Russian army as Ukrainian troops close in on the city. For 8 months, life has been tough as people face shortages of just about everything and harsh treatment by Russian military.
In recent weeks, we witnessed them kidnapping one couple, and the next day a woman was hanged in the center of Skatovsk just because she said Skatovsk is Ukraine.
He faces a situation that I think, again, is irreversible. There's no amount of shambolic mobilization, which is the only way to describe it, no amount of annexation, no amount of even veiled nuclear threats can actually get him out of this particular situation.
After 6 months in occupied Kherson, Pastor Alexander escaped the city with his wife and 10 children.
When the Russians took over, we weren't sure what to do, but we decided to continue with our church services.
Russian forces, on the lookout for so-called Nazis, searched his house several times. On September 6th, they arrested him in front of his wife and children.
I was kept in solitary confinement for 6 days. When they put me in a cell where there were 7 people but only 3 beds.
During interrogation, the Russians tried to prove he was a Nazi, ironically because of an English Bible in his office. Pastor Alexander was more worried about photos on his phone.
Many Americans donated to help with the construction of our church. He accused me of being an American agent. He was just looking for a reason to keep me. On my phone, there was a lot of evidence of my cooperation volunteering with the Army. So that became my prayer that they would not even see my phone, and Lord closed their eyes to it.
Between interrogations, he shared his faith with his cellmates.
My wife had managed to slip me a small Bible. So with that, I started witnessing to the other men and myself were there together for another 10 days. But the 7th day, they had all made Jesus Christ the Lord. That was when I finally realized why I was there.
Alexander had no idea if he would ever see his family again.
While I was being interrogated, the commandant said, if it was up to me, I would shoot all of you right now and throw you in the landfill. They hate Ukrainians so much. They cannot even stand to hear the word Ukraine.
Then, after 15 days of captivity, a miracle happened.
An Orthodox priest, whom I had never met before, came to the commandant and asked him to release me. And he agreed on one condition, that he could keep my car. So at the church there was still a minivan, and we put all my family into it, along with the injured neighbor, and we headed toward the front lines.
Their ordeal wasn't over. It took 4 days and lots of prayer to get through all the checkpoints to reach friendly lines.
I saw such joy in my children's eyes when they first came upon Ukrainians. They saw a soldier and said, "Look, they don't have masks. The Russians are all walking around in masks." And I said, "That's because they have nothing to hide. Bandits always wear masks."
Pastor Alexander and his family are now staying here in Kyiv and working with the local church while they pray for God's direction about when they should go home. But as Ukrainian forces move closer and closer to the city of Kherson, that day could come sooner rather than later.
I know that He will continue taking care of us, so I'm trying to seek first the kingdom of God and wait for everything else.
From Ukraine, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Still ahead, a Veterans Day tribute from one generation to the next.
Well, finally tonight, our nation celebrates Veterans Day tomorrow.
That's right, and tonight we put the spotlight on one group of high school students in Pennsylvania doing their part to honor service members. Air Force JROTC cadets led a flag-folding ceremony, and choir students performed the Army Forces Medley in honor of each of the branches of service. A big thank you to the men and women of the military who have so bravely served.
Patriotically served and, without really asking for anything in return.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see them honored.
Right.
We want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening.
Have a great night, and we hope to see you right back here tomorrow.